everybody, it's Em sitting here in front of my fireplace, which we have never used in the 3 years that we've lived in this house. That little log was left by the previous owners, I think, you know, as a housewarming kind of thing, but we've just, with the cats and the fact that it's a carpeted room just feels really wrong because the ash is just going to get everywhere. This is a room we'd really like to redo the fireplace and everything at some point. But anyway, I'm in this room because I'm trying to avoid the construction noise from the neighbors who are putting an addition on their house, and it's kind of loud when they get started. So it's the side of the house that my office is on. Anyway, all that aside, today we are going to talk about By Any Other Name by Lauren Kate, which is the first book I read in April. It's not the first book I started, but I picked it up at the library and it had it was a special 2-week only book, so I decided to sit down and read it real quick before going back to the book I had started, which I will talk about in my wrap up at the end of the month. But this book I just had a lot of thoughts about, so I decided it probably merited its own video. So here we are. I had to turn the camera a little bit because the light is changing and it's gonna wash me out here pretty soon. But I'm gonna start by giving you a synopsis of the story. By Any Other Name by Lauren Kate is the story of Lainey Bloom, who is an assistant editor at Peony Press, I think. She works under a woman named Alex, A-L-I-X, Alex, I don't know, who edits Noah, N-O-A, Calloway, a huge romance author. Now, Noah is very private. No one's ever met her. She doesn't attend events. But Lainey has emailed with Noah over the past 7 years as they work on books together and they play chess online together. And, you know, they just kind of have this nice email relationship. But she's never spoken to Noah on the phone because Noah has an assistant named Terry, and Terry is the bulwark, the wall, right? You can't get past Terry. So anyway, what happens is Alex is on maternity leave, and then it's announced that she's not going to come back to work after having her baby, and that gives Lainey this provisional promotion. But the problem is Noah is 6 months late with a manuscript, and Peony relies on Noah's best-selling manuscripts to sustain the rest of their line, their list, as it were. And so Lainey needs to get a manuscript out of Noah in order to keep her job and to keep the press open, basically. So, a lot of pressure. It's not really a spoiler, but if you don't want to know anything else about this book, I would stop now, go read it, come back after you've read it, listen to me rant. But if you look at the cover of the book, it gives away the story that Noah, N-O-A, is actually Noah, N-O-A-H, a male author masquerading under a female pseudonym to write these romance novels. So Lainey signs an NDA, and then she meets Noah and finds out that Noah is Noah with an H. Okay, so that's the setup. I have a lot of thoughts as somebody who's worked in publishing and who left publishing after having her first baby. Because, they set it up as this, oh my God, she's leaving to have a family, and, and I would have stayed in publishing. I love books, and I would have stayed in publishing indefinitely. But publishing does not pay enough for you to put your child in childcare, especially in any large city. I worked in Boston. But so your options are to put your whole salary towards childcare, and sometimes even it's not even enough, or to give that up and stay home with your child, at which point, and that's assuming you can get a spot at a child care center because they're all full and all of that kind of thing, which is what I ran into. And you know what? So let's romanticize publishing all you want. It doesn't pay enough because it just shunts the interns in there, like unpaid internships. It gets a lot of unpaid labor from nights and weekends. So I had some issues. Also, I had some issues with the fact that basically parenthood and motherhood and marriage in general are villainized in this book. Lainey has two work friend people. I don't even remember their names. Well, no, Meg is a mom and a wife, and she spends the entire time complaining about being a mom and a wife and trying to get away from her husband and her kids and trying to act like a college student and, you know, dance on bars and knock back tequila. And then there's the gay guy friend, because of course there's a gay guy friend, and his name's like Rufus or something ridiculous, and he is very stereotypically the gay guy friend. So they have no other personality traits, they have no other depth than these like character traits, and it was very like frustrating, I will just say, to read that take, because, you know, here's this romance and we're supposedly like celebrating like falling in love, but yet we're gonna vilify the process that comes after. In fact, Lainey is at the beginning of this book, she's engaged but reluctant to set a date and, you know, dragging her feet, and it's like, what do you have against getting married and having a family? And not everybody needs that. Not everybody needs that. But this book is just super, super against it. Like, it shows no good aspect to being married, having kids. It's just, I don't know. I found it very telling. Okay, it's very upsetting to me, and just very noticeable across the story. So yeah, so Lainey has this boyfriend, this fiance, and then she meets. It's complicated. She meets Noah. At first at an event, but she doesn't know at that time that Noah, N-O-A-H, is Noah, N-O-A. She has like this moment, this, you know, ooh, you know, the little lightning bolt moment that you get when you zing from somebody. And then she goes home to her fiance. And that, I mean, I get it, it happens, but like, you know, we all know, oh, well, this guy's actually going to be the guy. And of course, her fiance has brown eyes, but the new guy has green eyes. Because of course he does. Anyway, I just sick of everybody hating on brown eyes all the time. But it's why I gave Julian brown eyes in Ghost of Marshall Park, in fact, because I was like, let's give some brown eye love here. I like a nice dark eyed guy. Anyway, yeah, so, and it's pretty clear early on that, like, Lainey and her boyfriend Ryan, by the way, I noticed this reading, like, nobody has a name that's more than about 5 letters long in this book. There's Lainey, there's Terry, there's Meg, there's Rufus, there's Ryan, there's Noah, Sue. I don't know, I was like, anyway, I don't know. Again, there was just a lot of noticeable stuff in this book where I was just like, and also just editing wise, I was like, they used Venmo as a verb, which is fine because colloquially, we do use Venmo. I'll Venmo you, right? But they didn't capitalize it. I'm like, oh, that's a brand? Like, capitalize it? You capitalize dumpster, you capitalize Kleenex, you capitalize Venmo. Come on, it's like, it's a thing. It's not a generic. Anyway. This is just an aside. I was distracted by a lot of these things in this book. Anyway, at the point that I was talking about how like she and Ryan don't want the same things, and that's pretty clear early on. So it's not a surprise when, spoiler, they break up halfway through the book, and you know he stomps off or whatever. Because obviously we need to make room for the new guy. But when Lainey finds out that Noah is Noah with an H, she has this really huge overreaction. Like, and I get it, like, this writer's been her idol and she's been emailing for 7 years and she felt like she, you know, knew them. But instead of like curiosity or even just shock, she just goes full-blown angry in a way that just the situation did not, there was nothing in the situation that felt like it merited it, and there was nothing in the story that justified or explained or bolstered her reaction. Like, it made no sense the way she just like lost it. And then her like like she goes straight to hating this guy for no clear reason. And the whole book's told from Lainey's point of view, so she doesn't give us like an understanding of why she's so mad. She's like, oh, you've betrayed all your readers. I'm like, by what, existing? Like, so he's a guy, so what? He still wrote good books. And there's probably like, you could probably have a very good discussion on like separating the art from the artist or whatever, but this book is not deep enough for that. So she just, you know, and she immediately goes to, he's a terrible person, he's pompous, he's arrogant, he's awful. And I'm like, you don't even know, like, you know this person via email, and you know this person's not like that. Why would you suddenly assume, like, I didn't understand, like, why you would assume that the person via the emails was different from the person you just met. But, like, Lainey seems to assume that it's all been a put on. And it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. It rang so false. It felt so convoluted to set up this enemies to lovers thing where they're never really enemies. They're more like irritations to one another. And really, Lainey's the irritant. You know, and you're stuck with her this whole time. You know, you don't hear anything from Noah's point of view. So, irritation to acceptance / friendship, and then you get eventually to the, you know, this is not, by the way, a steamy book. This is not a romance in that there's gonna be a lot of hot and heavy stuff. This is very much a romance. I haven't read anything by Lauren Kate, but I heard that she wrote YA before this, and this is very much in the vein of, you know, you get to like the first kiss, and that's the end of the book. So if you're coming into this hoping for a romance that's got steam, this is not it. I will say, I mean, for me that's fine because I don't really care for explicit stuff, but yeah, like I read some reviews. People were like, "Oh, well, it's not really a romance," and I'm like, "Well, no, I mean, it is. I think it's a kind of romance. It's just not the kind that right now a lot of people find popular. I don't know." But yeah, like Lainey has like some thoughts, but even those aren't explicit. Like she's, you know, I think at one point when she and her fiance are still together, she's like, oh, I learned how to slip out of a dress under my coat. And so I'm in my coat, but there's nothing underneath it, like when I come home or something. Like she's hoping to jump her fiance, right? But you don't see any of that. You don't get any of that on page. So, you know, take that as you will. I felt like there was diversity for like diversity's sake, like performative diversity in a lot, like the gay friend, but also like a lot of like in the name dropping sense, where she's like, oh, I just acquired a Moroccan author who wrote a queer Casablanca, you know, update or something like that. And I'm just like, and it's not like that like contributes to the book, but it's almost like in this name droppy kind of, oh you know, here's how publishing's getting to be, you know, woke or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. It felt earnest and phony at the same time. I don't even know, I don't know. There was a lot, and there was like, oh, I'm this 70-year-old woman. I signed a 70-year-old woman's steamy paranormal romance or something, and I'm like, okay, cool. But that's not what this book is about. So like, I don't know. But they're like, oh, look at all the good we're doing as publishing house to sign these little authors, or like, yeah, you know. Okay. I mean, they literally used the hashtag own voices in this book, which, if you've heard anything about own voices, you know that in itself is problematic, but it's all like, oh, we're hoping to start an own voices imprint. And I'm just like, ugh. Okay. So, I to be clear, I'm all for diversity in publishing. I'm just not, I'm for legitimate versus performative. Like, the fact that publishing is just begging us to applaud it for doing, you know, stuff it should do anyway. But anyway, it's like when my kid wants, like, money for cleaning his room. I'm like, you're supposed to clean your room. You're supposed to keep it clean. That's just one of the, that's how this works. This is that, you know. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Also, though, they have this whole thing about these balloons at the beginning of this book. They are balloons that have edible confetti in them, little slivers of cake or something, and they're super fragile. And of course, our main character is klutzy, because you can't have a rom-com if the main girl isn't like clumsy. So, anyway, you're supposed to pop the balloon and catch the cake, eat the... I can't figure this out, okay? I don't, and I'm sure I could Google it, but like, that just sounds like a mess. That sounds like a mess to me. That sounds like a disaster of raining edible food. Like, you're gonna catch it and eat it, or you're not gonna eat it off the floor. Somebody's gonna have to clean that up. Speaking as a mom and the person who usually has to clean that up, just saying. Anyway, this book has a lot of coincidence. It relies on a lot of coincidences. It's very much like scene to scene in an almost like cinematic, like it was written for a Hallmark Channel adaptation more than to be its own thing. I don't feel like there's a lot of depth to Lainey's character. I think we're supposed to believe by the end of the book that she's somehow grown as a person, but I didn't see it and didn't feel it. I just didn't care for her a whole lot. I thought Noah was actually pretty charming, which is why I kind of wish we had seen more of him, or seen more of like from his point of view maybe, or something. There's just a lot of like little stuff that just there's no payoff to. Yeah, and yet it was very readable. I mean, I sailed through this book. It's an easy read, even with all my nitpicking, even with all the like things that were annoying and whatever. Like, I ended up giving it a 3.6. I gave it a 3 on Goodreads and a 3.75 on Storygraph or whatever. But like overall, like, yeah, it's 3.6 because I was entertained. Even when I was annoyed, I was entertained. A couple other things, and then I promise I will be done ranting. This book has, like, towards the end, as Noah finally writes some of the manuscript that Lainey is waiting on, samples of the manuscript. And I will just say that these samples of Noah's romance book did not sell me on the idea that Noah is a best-selling romance author. I just didn't find them to be very good. They weren't very distinct from the rest of the book. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I could definitely believe that this was written by a completely different person. And I just think that when you're writing a book within a book, that's a tricky thing to pull off, and this book did not do that. Did not pull it off. And yeah, and then the other thing that I did notice, there is, in fact, towards the end of this book, the line about letting out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. And I don't know if this was meant as a joke, like, haha, I've used the line, right? Like, because the writer's not deft enough to signal if it's meant to be funny. And I just don't know if, like, the writer and the editor both thought they were being funny here and it just didn't work or what, but it didn't work. It wasn't good. It was just like, are you kidding me? In 2022, we know better than to use this, right? Like, if you're going to use it, then you absolutely need to hang a lampshade on that so that we know you're using it. And you know you're using it. Not in earnest. But anyway, that's everything that I have to say about that. It was a really long video of me just like nitpicking this book to death. And yet, again, I still gave it a 3.6. I mean, it was still entertaining and readable. And the things that bothered me might not bother you. It's all, you know, this is all just me. And I'm reading Heiresses now, so a little bit of nonfiction, and I'm reading a murder mystery right now. Oh, and if you didn't see my most recent little short, Ghosts of Marshley Park, in fact, just won an award, first place at the Book Fest in ghosts, thrillers, and mysteries or something like that. Ghost, basically, was the chief category there, since it is a ghost story. If you haven't read it, I'd love it if you would give it a try. It is free to read on Kindle Unlimited if you happen to have access to that. And that is everything, and we'll see you next time, whatever I come up with to talk about the next go-round. See you then.